A couple of years ago, I did a video on a recirculation manifold with parts that I had got from a restaurant supply store, and it's been a pretty successful video on my channel. But one of the things that kind of always bothered me about it was that in order to make this thing, you had to have access to some of these discounted things at the restaurant supply store. So I kind of challenged myself recently, and I wanted to redo that recirculation manifold. And what I wanted to do was actually use some parts from like Home Depot or Lowe's or one of the big box stores like that. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I accomplished that for right around $8. How's it going? My name's Brian. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you'd like to learn more about electric brewing and see how-to videos just like this one, consider subscribing. And if you do, don't forget to click that bell so you won't miss a video when it comes out. Now, part of the reason for a recirculation arm is so that you don't have channeling in your grain. And what that is basically is whenever you have a stream of water that's like penetrating right down into the grain bed, and what happens is the water all starts going through that one little stream, or the wort starts going through that one little stream, and basically it prevents the rest of the grain from having the water and wort filter through them to help with conversion and that sort of thing. So that's one of the reasons why I made this device, was so that on some of the systems like the Grainfather, the Anvil Foundry, the Brewzilla, those devices could be used with like a brew bag. But when you use a brew bag, you take all the other components pretty much out, and then you're left with just a hose basically drilling right down into the grain, unless you have something to put in there to kind of disperse the liquid as it's going over the grain bed. So here's what I did. I went to Home Depot and I actually purchased several items. I kind of went through some of their hardware area, and some of this stuff comes in like $1.18 packs or whatever. So when I'm talking about the cost of it, I'm talking about per usage of what I'm doing in the video. It actually cost me like $11 or $12 to get all of the stuff for it, but some of it I didn't use, so I'm not counting it in the price. So the first thing that I start out with is a 2-inch washer. It's a 2-inch stainless steel washer with a 1/2-inch hole. And then in order to attach that to the strapping that I'm using, I needed to kind of plug that 1/2-inch hole with a smaller washer, because I can't use a 1/2-inch bolt to connect to the strap. So what I did was I got a 1/8-inch stainless steel washer that's 1 inch in diameter. It'll cover that hole and give you some adjustment. Now, to attach that to the larger washer and the strap, I used 1032, which is the size and thread pitch on the screw. It's a machine screw. Use that screw, 3/8 of an inch long, and then I used a lock washer and a nut for that. Now for the strap, this was where I had to get kind of creative. In order to do the strap, what I did was I used a 6-inch hose clamp that was stainless steel. Now, I've used some hose clamps in some other little projects that I've done, and it actually makes a great way to get some stainless steel strapping without breaking the bank. Because, I mean, you can get one of these stainless steel hose clamps for like a couple bucks, which is a pretty good deal in my opinion, and that gives you something to work with as far as the stainless steel strapping goes. I also needed another hose clamp to be able to connect this to whatever type of hosing you're using for your recirculation, as well as I picked up a hose barb so that whenever you tighten down the hose clamp to attach this thing to the hose, you're not collapsing the silicone hosing down and cutting off the flow. So the grand total of all those items put together for this particular project is $8 and a penny. So I figure you can probably fudge me a penny there. I know my thumbnail says $8, but 8.01 I think is close enough. So let's take a look at how to assemble it. The first thing I wanted to do was cut the hose clamp down to size. And so I went and measured 8 inches on the hose clamp. Basically, you unscrew the worm gear on it, and then you'll be left with the hose clamp that's like hanging wide open. So what we were interested in is just the solid strapping, not the part with the gears in it. So if you do pick one up, make sure you get it with a good amount of strapping in it, not solid, because they do make them with solid worm gear holes, I guess you would call it. I cut that 8 inches, and just a tip on cutting the stainless steel strapping like that. One of the things that you want to do when I'm using the hacksaw here, one of the things you want to make sure you do is you don't cut like perpendicular straight up and down. You want to make sure you cut like at a pretty good angle, almost straight parallel with the actual steel itself, so that will help you get started and then get cutting. Now, you don't have to cut all the way through it. Once you get about halfway through, you can take and you can kind of flex it back and forth, and it's brittle enough that it'll actually snap off. One of the other things I do recommend that you do with that is take either a file or a piece of sandpaper or something like that, and kind of take any burrs off or anything like that, just to make sure it's not going to cut you later on. Now, that honestly is about the hardest part of this whole build. After you get that cut, you want to mark to the center of whatever the strapping is. Mine was just a little bit longer than 8 inches, which wasn't a big deal. So I measured 4 inches. And then you want to drill with either like a 13/64 drill bit would be about the smallest one that I would use. You could go all the way up to an 1/8 inch because that number 10 screw will fit fine through an 1/8 inch hole. Then after you do that, what I did was I put the stainless steel washer, the large 2-inch washer, right on top of the strapping and kind of centered up my hole. And then put some marks on the outside edges of the washer. And then that let me know where I need to bend the strapping. So I used a adjustable spanner for that. I just kind of tightened it down until I could get the stainless steel to fit in there pretty tightly. And then just use that kind of as a metal brake and bent both sides over. And then once I did that, then it was basically just kind of put a little bit of a hoop in it, if you will, and then straighten it back up where you're going to attach it to the hosing. Then after you get that done, it's pretty much just assemble it. And really all you need to do for that is I took the screw, put a washer on it, ran the screw with the washer on it up through the strapping, up through the center of the 2-inch washer, then put another one of the 1/8 inch by 1 inch washers on top of that, the lock nut, and then the nut itself, and then tighten all that down. One thing that I did whenever I started tightening it down, I didn't tighten it down all the way. Got it where it was pretty snug, and then I actually visually lined up the 2-inch washer in the center of that strapping so that it's kind of even in there whenever you go to put it all together. Once I did that, I just tightened it back down, and then we're ready to attach it to the silicone hosing. The hose barb that I got was a 1/2 inch to 5/8 size, kind of an adapter or a reducer or whatever you want to call it. So I cut off the 5/8 side and just left the 1/2 inch side, and it kind of left like a nice little flange so that when you push it up into the hosing there, it doesn't like go all the way in and get stuck. So then what I did with that is I put the hose clamp over top of the silicone hosing and then basically slid the 2 sides of the strapping up underneath of that hose clamp, tightened it down, and then once you get it tight, you might kind of need to adjust it a little bit to make sure it's nice and even. That way you're going to get a good spray off of it in your brewing system. So how did it do? Well, it actually, I'm showing it here with the anvil pump in an anvil foundry. And I tell you, that's probably the least flowing pump that I have, but it does a great job of, you know, the liquid comes down, hits the washer and disperses out into a really nice pattern. I think it would work very well. One of the comments that I had on that video quite a bit was that people use a shower head. I really don't like that for a couple of reasons, and I'll tell you why. Well, first thing is, there could be brass in the shower head. A lot of times, they'll use like a chrome-plated brass or something like that. And you really don't want to use brass in brewing because you can extract some of that zinc out of the brass when you're brewing because of the acidity of the wort. The other thing that I kind of was a little bit, I didn't like was that the nozzles are so small. I felt like you could probably get that clogged up with some bits of grain or something like that. People probably do it and have no problem, but my biggest concern is, any kind of zinc content inside of the actual spray head itself. I hope this is a solution that's helpful for you. I know you can get the little plastic wort aerators, but I just think that they don't put very much of a pattern out. They're kind of really small and kind of direct. So I wanted to come up with something that was readily available, easy to put together, and easy to use, and just worked. So if you like the video, give us a thumbs up. We certainly do appreciate that. Leave me a comment down below. Tell me what you think of it, if it's worthwhile doing, or if it's not worthwhile doing, let me know that too. Thumbs up, thumbs down, whichever. This has been Brian for Short Circuited Brewers. We'll see you on the next video.